So enlightened, darling. You too can be enlightened by me. Walk this way. Hello and welcome to Inspiral Out Loud, where we are exploring ways to create a thriving world for all sentience. So today we are talking to Bonny Hut. She is an incredible artist and teacher and community generator in Australia from South Africa. And I met her many years ago in the areas of community and healing. And she's also very well trained and experienced in all areas of healing and theology and metaphysics and all things red pill. Welcome, Bonny. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tjoni.
Today's topic, I've called it, Is It All in My Head? We've been having a lot of these kinds of discussions lately. We know that there's been a lot of disinformation in the interwebs and in our actual physical world. But one thing that I haven't heard a lot of people discussing is the disinformation that happens in our internal metaphysical realm. And right now, I just feel so incredibly important to be chatting about this because, you know, there's so many entities and energies just infiltrating our senses and our inner world. And it can make it really difficult to really know what's going on and who to trust. So we're going to be chatting about discernment in the inner and outer worlds and about the link between mental illness and possession. So there's a lot tugging at us at the moment. And Bonny, you've been exploring these kind of areas of metaphysics and theologies and possession and mental wellness for a very long time. So what have you discovered about the general nature of this realm, both physical and metaphysical, in your many years of study and exploration?
Okay, so we'll just break that down a little bit because there's obviously many layers to that.
Yeah.
Also, with regards to discernment, I mean, even the level of hypnosis that's happening is quite incredible because people are getting all these thoughts in their heads, like people who are anti a lot of things going on and getting the opposite thoughts in their head. Of course, the Tavistock Institute sort of perfected the art of hypnosis, and with the advent of digital television sets and that have certain flicker rates, of course, the hypnosis, that type of manipulation has escalated. You know, of course, with entities and spiritual interference, which is a lot more vast than what we can even comprehend. Obviously, the lower your frequency, the more traumas you have, or the more doorways these entities have access to your field. A lot of the time, your thoughts aren't even your own thoughts. They, of course, also just repeated thoughts that other people have said. You know, what percentage is actually you? What percentage is actually other people's ideas about you that you just roll on with?
We've mentioned previously that it's important to look at discernment. And in the media realm, we think of discernment often as in, you know, receiving information from more of an academic point of view, you know, learning how to question information that's coming in. So we've got so much information coming in now also on a metaphysical level, like not even through our five senses anymore, on what kind of information is infiltrating us on our inner world, like on a more subtle way, like not purely external information.
One example, morals come from the outside in. It's what society thinks that you should be doing, thinking, feeling. Intuition comes from the inside out, and that is a whole system of navigation as to how to increase that intuition. It is actually your own soul, your higher self telling you what is right or wrong. And of course, we have three sort of brains: the head, the heart, and the gut. And of course, the gut is like a yes-no organs, for want of a better word. And if we can cut out all of the external interference, which is obviously a process in itself, even physical detoxing, toxins are the same frequencies as entities. It's just another doorway in. Less is more. It's a question of trying to get less and less rather than more and more information, in a sense of the word, cutting right down back to the source, because also souled beings have access to codes and frequencies that are located outside of the matrix. We can override this matrix. So instead of just looking for information that is only around us, we've got to balance it as well with trying to get into silence so that we can more clearly hear the difference between what is entities putting thoughts in our heads, other people putting thoughts in our heads, hypnosis, accessing that source, that prime truth, because the truth is really the only place that you're going to find the truth eventually is from that key, which has access to yourself outside of the matrix.
So a few conversations have come up lately about the relationship between trauma and mental illness versus actual possession. I'd just like to look at some of the roadmaps. So in my roadmap, what kind of happens during traumatic events, especially during childhood, is that they create holes in the energy body, and they also create a particular type of energy or frequency that then attracts in, we could call them parasitic entities, that then will feed on that kind of energy. And because we have holes basically in our energy bodies, they can kind of like get in and take hold of us. And then in our patterning during our lives, that then when they're kind of lacking in their food, they can actually trigger us and our behaviors into generating more similar kind of events and situations in order to keep producing that kind of energy. Sometimes we talk about loosh and those kinds of words in order to kind of keep feeding them. I've heard a lot of people talking about exorcism and things like that. We've had a chat about that with someone in Australia who does that kind of work. What comes to me is how important that is versus actually learning how to shift and heal our trauma so that we're not feeding them in the first place. Because I'm sort of creating a bit of a relationship between those kind of energy parasites, and do we just like knock them off or stop feeding them? The same as in our bodies from a terrain model, we can put the poisons in there to kill off the parasites, or we can clean up our inner terrain so we're not feeding them in the first place. So what would your take on that be, between how traumatic events, what the effect they have in the body, and how that kind of relates to possession?
As you said, the traumas are one of the doorways into which entities can come in. And of course, PTSD, for example, which is not very understood. I mean, just as one example, that is caused by soul loss, because when you are having a traumatic event, your soul leaves your body in that event, and a part of your soul is still stuck in that, looping in that area of time and space. And to heal soul loss, there's a number of different things. We can circle back to PTSD. As you say, it's one example of trauma. This planet is really a loosh farm. We're not here to learn lessons. So trauma is, of course, highly advocated and highly manipulated so that we experience more trauma to feed the loosh farm. Now, whether you address the entities first or whether you address the doorways into which the entities come through first, that is a very, very good question. In my opinion, if a person is in a serious situation, it depends on how extreme the situation is. If a person is in an extreme situation, I would address the entities first, because the entities will try and prevent you from healing. They will sabotage your healing. They will do a lot of things so that you can't heal properly. However, if the situation is not as serious, then I would go about doing what you with the various techniques and various modalities to heal the traumas and heal the doorways first, because then, of course, the entities will naturally go away because they won't have access to your field. As I say, the field is so vast. But for example, in the New Age movement, they say, oh, be positive, be positive. And of course, that's this positive sort of thing is just tip of the iceberg. Underneath the iceberg, you have layers and layers and layers of trapped emotions, karmic imprints, other energy blocks, and they don't want you looking at that. They just want you, they think if you just be positive, you'll be right and you'll attract what you need to attract. I think that's obviously one of the many New Age deceptions. And of course, the healing is in the shadow work. Some of the healing modalities are relatively simple, but you just need the right tools. You just need to know how they work to have a more efficient way of healing those doorways.
Just coming back to what you were saying about it depends on the severity of something, whether someone would need something like an exorcism. And I'm just thinking of, again, coming back to the energetic versus the physical. If somebody's had a lifetime of toxic behavior, emotionally and physically, then maybe it will end up in a cancer. So, you can, if you're going to die, then okay, cut it out. But then if you don't go and address your lifestyle, you're just simply creating the same terrain to feed more of those cancers. And so I kind of see it the same as in the spiritual terrain. If something's just really got a hold of you so deeply that you cannot function properly, then I just came up with the term holistic exorcism. Go and chop the thing out, but then make sure you do the deep work to make sure that, you do fill those holes, you do tend to the trauma, you do get into the shadow work to stop those things coming to you in the first place. I really agree with the New Age movement, that it's just creating so many Band-Aids, and it's really important to know that any of those movements, they're all created by the same beast, just to give people a feeling that there's something outside of the alternative, but it's still within the same cage. So I'm glad that you touched on that. Let's just look at entities then, and let's say parasitic entities. Why would they want to engage with us in the first place? What is it that makes them just go, I want you?
Firstly, I'll just touch on something you said previously with the New Age movement. Just the darkness is divided into two factions, the dark and the false light. So I'd say a large percentage of the New Age movement falls into the category of the false light. Now, again, why would entities want to engage with humans and animals and plants and everything else? The further and further down the rabbit hole you go, the more you find out that this is a loosh harvesting system, this a loosh harvesting matrix. They want their lunch. And of course, they have a hierarchical system. Dolores Cannon famously said that Earth is a school. And I'm learning more and more and more that Earth is not a school because of numerous different things, including the mind wipe that we get every time we are reincarnated. A school goes from, in South Africa, we have standard 1, standard 2. I think Australia's grade 1, grade 2. You remember what you did in grade 1 so that you can go on to grade 2. But if you keep getting the mind wipe every time you come in here, you can't grow from what you've learned previously. It's all to feed off your energy and to create as many different, whether it's trapped emotions, things that keep you stuck and looping around in a circle and keep the doorways open, of course, which includes, say, trapped emotions, even physical toxins in the body. As I mentioned before, toxins are the same frequencies as entities, and a lot of researchers seem to think that parasites are entities and demonic entities and all the rest in physical form. It's the physical embodiment of these entities. So basically to have their feed and to keep the matrix system going, because we are the batteries.
And I would suggest that potentially with the parasites that we've potentially got kind of positive and negative parasites as well. If you look at, say, at the terrain model, like when there's a lot of junk in the body, a lot of those parasites or what people would call like germs or bacteria, will actually morph into whatever will clean up certain things. Just as the same as various energies and various foods and various experiences, that some of those can be potentially very helpful. But then you've got a lot of parasites that will actually hijack the nervous system and turn you into basically an addict of things like sugars that will feed them and not you. It's interesting that, yeah, a lot of physical parasites will actually take over your brain function. So it's not then that hard to imagine that similarly it happens in the energy realm.
Yeah, because whatever it is you keep feeding yourself, whether it's physical stuff, food, those type of parasites will be attracted to that. And it's the same with your mind and your energy field. Whatever you keep feeding your mind, your energy field and your space, again, those types of parasites will be attracted to that and then amplify whatever it is you are feeding yourself and also keep you stuck in a loop.
And we only need to see what's being fed to us on every level in the world with, you know, the 99% of our food just basically being poison, the same with the medicines, the same with television, the same with the airwaves and our electricity. Like all of it's just designed to keep us in these toxic strangleholds.
Yeah, keep you in the loop.
Let's look at that. So how possession and addiction actually relate to each other. Like I said, I have a feeling that, you know, whatever entities are bound to us will create the kinds of addiction that keep us in like struggle and anger and shame and like all of those kinds of things that feed the proverbial beast. So what have you seen in your experience relating to how possession and addiction affect each other?
So yes, I had been studying possession for quite a few years. There's a very interesting Irish exorcist called Dr. Malachi Martin. He's written quite a few books. I've read all his books. He said, explained that possession usually happens slowly, with the exception of substances. So if you want to get possessed very quickly, all you need to do is take some drugs or, alcohol, whatever. And of course, that's why it's called spirits. Just on a side note, he also spoke about the perfectly possessed people. There's a faction of people who are possessed, highly possessed, and they know it, and they function very well and they are quite happy with their situation. But generally, every type of drug or substance has a demonic entity that's specifically attached or in charge with that specific substance. Trauma doesn't help either. Usually people take their substances because they're trying to cover something up. Often trapped emotions. If they've got large amounts of trapped emotions, they might take a lot of substances to cover that up. And of course, inherited entities, sometimes entities are inherited, whether they are alcoholic entities or, various other kinds that can be passed down. Curses as well can be passed down along the family line. So again, looking at the work of Dr. Jerry Marzinski, who is the psychiatrist who spent 40 years in the psych wards studying the voices of schizophrenics, very interesting stuff. He eventually discovered that the voices were coming from entities and were there because of initial trauma, because obviously they were not hallucinations, because hallucinations act in a certain way. He says that that's like listening to the other side of a telephone line. Also, just on another slight note, a lot of the people that are possessed or the demonic seem to be running some kind of an AI sort of program. They also don't seem to be subject to the same laws of karma that natural humans are. And I mean, we can talk about karma, what that is, because it doesn't operate how people think it is. It's not actually what we think it is. Firstly, sometimes those entities are inherited. There is always a trade-off. It starts to become kind of interesting because the person can't differentiate between themselves and the entity at some point, and their thoughts and the entity's thoughts. And of course, the entity keeps telling them, oh, I give you so much power. I give you so much goodies. I give you all this stuff. You don't want me to leave. And they think it's their own thoughts. And then with regards to when they pass over, that's the $1,000,000 question, whether they just simply reincarnate and play the same game over again.
It's a curious one. I'm also thinking of that because you mentioned, like generational curses and things like that. And I'm just thinking of this in terms of, passing these demonics down the genetic line. If you haven't had children, and we haven't had kids, and so many people in my world haven't had kids, I was kind of shown in a quest the other day that if you see the generations of kind of concentric circles of our ancestors, and so we're in the middle, then as soon as we have children, then we end up coming to the outer circles, right? But if we don't have children, we stay at the epicenter of that kind of proverbial wheel. And I was told that any of us that have made that choice, whether consciously or subconsciously, to not reproduce, we end up being almost like a keystone or something in that ancestral field, and we have to finish whatever junk has happened, including any of those old oaths and binds and curses and things like that. And regarding schizophrenics, I spoke to a guy that was schizophrenic, and I literally saw somebody that looked like his younger brother, somebody that I saw as his younger brother talking in his ear. And I asked his physical brother, I said, did you guys have another brother that died? He said, yeah. That's totally who it was. And it actually caused this man a ridiculous amount of distress, to the point that he sadly left the world early. But, they can be real saboteurs. If demonic possession leads their host to an early demise, that kind of seems to be a bit self-destructive for the demonic entity as well. How do you see that playing out?
Well, look, it's exactly the same if you exorcise if you get rid of a demonic out of a person. They just simply float around and try and find a new host to feed off.
I watched one of the Alabar Jones videos that you shared, and he was talking about the guys in was it in not Bali? He was talking about some people somewhere doing exorcisms, and he literally just saw the demons jumping around from one place to the next, kind of like in the Fallen movie with Denzel Washington. But is there any processes you know of that literally are actually destroying those entities? Or are they simply being extracted?
That's the $100 million question. I mean, I know that Alobar destroys them. So does Tjoni Sayers, who's also another exorcist. So there are sort of exorcists who go around destroying these beings because they don't seem to be able to recuperate, or they don't seem to be able to shift from their prime position of just simply being a parasite and destroying everything around them. It just seems to be their nature. There are some healers who try and find the divine spark in these entities and show them the new way of finding their divine spark. There's some controversy between those two sort of modalities.
Yeah, I actually had an experience that, I always previously had gone down more of that kind of aloha path of trying to connect everything back to something divine. But then a few years ago, I woke up out of a dream that felt like it wasn't a dream. In the dream, I was just looking down at the ground. It was covered in leaves, and there was a thing that was like a non-thing, and it was almost like a vacuum that was just sucking the ground down into the shape of what it was, except it was the reverse of a shape, and it was the reverse of existence. And I was actually just kind of like screaming and grunting at this thing that was like almost antimatter, and it felt like the only way to find any ease was to actually annihilate this non-thing. It was like the entire opposite of existence. And up until that point, I thought I could reconnect everything to divine light. And after that, I just went, no, I've got no idea about this now. I actually woke up face down on my bed with my face in my pillow grunting. I grunted myself awake. I was making so much noise.
I also used to think that, we all humans had the same blood and all humans were the same. And after many years, I've realized, only a small percentage of the human population are actually human and are actually source connected. There's everything under the sun living on this planet, including AI, PCs, as a lot of people have been doing a lot of research into lately, various different types of extraterrestrials in human bodies. A lot of them are also under the AI umbrella. How did the humans get here? That's another conversation. And a lot of them are just part of this AI program to keep the program going, and they're also not subject to the same laws of karma as the humans are. Is it best to destroy this AI matrix and the cogs of the wheel? Possibly, because, for example, the New Age or New Cage movement, as they call it, advocates this pacifist, we're all one, forgiveness sort of vibe. And I'm actually thinking that might not be the way to go. We might have to actually sort of kick some ass.
We do need to kick ass. And we need to start here by just shedding real light, not false light, and over what's actually going on here. I guess part of that comes down to actually how we orientate ourselves towards it, because it's not going to be for everybody. Because if people are still stuck in fear and that sense of having to bow down to authority and, other people know better than us, all of that kind of stuff, then to start looking at these structures, if that's going to cause them fear, then it's just going to keep feeding the same beast. So I think we definitely need to keep tending to ourselves first before we navigate all of this too much, so that we're fighting out of love for rather than fear of. That takes us on to our next question then. One of my curiosities, especially in the last maybe 5 years or so, has really been learning how to discern between imagination, memory, internal dreams, external dreams, and external interference and an actual guidance. And one thing that a friend said to me that I thought was really useful, one is that things that are really genuinely simply wanting to share information with us will actually just show us through visuals and through experience. Whereas things that are wanting to control us and act as a harvester of some description are going to use words. And I thought that was interesting. Also, he said, as soon as anything's starting to feed your ego, like you mentioned before about some schizophrenics having the words in their minds that, we're here to help you and all of that kind of stuff and help you get what you want. Those kinds of words always are there in order to extract something from you. So some of my experiences, I would have been a bit concerned about them, except that the way that we interacted right from the start, there was no ego. It was as in I was just being decimated by them, basically. What are your thoughts on that? How do you discern between all of those areas with the tools that you've got so far?
Let's just start with imagination. I think each one of those is a completely different story, so to speak. Imagination is an irony within an irony, or a paradox within a paradox, because your imagination is literally what you're creating. Imagination. This is the nation of imagination. It is literally the thing that can create reality or create worlds. So as David Icke says, we've been manipulated to create a reality for ourselves that suits an agenda. So to say discern between imagination, you are creating that on some level. It depends on also from which level you are imagining, whether you're imagining from just the alpha brainwave state or theta brainwave state, or if you can imagine from almost the source level, then you are a programmer, not somebody who's just playing the video game or in the video game. And that is where they don't want people to go. And of course, to access that, the only way to access that is through yourself, not out of yourself, because that's one thing they're terrified of is people getting to the programmer level. With regards to, for example, memory is extremely unreliable, in my perception. Of course, you can have memories implanted. It also depends on which timeline you're looking at. It also depends on your perception of things, how you remembered things, and how you've been manipulated to remember things. I just think it's very unreliable. Dreams can be so convoluted. They're so difficult to navigate, dreams. And just one thing about ego, because you mentioned ego, I think there is a little bit of the ego has also obviously been hammered in the New Age movement. And of course, the ego helps us discern and create barriers. It's been heavily promoted to not have an ego in the New Age movement. And I think there could also be some issues surrounding that. Because one's ego might stand up and fight, but if you don't have the ego, you go more with the flow and get pushed around a bit more.
Right. Then there was also external interference, but before you touch on that, I want to touch back on the memory actually, because that's a really curious one, and I didn't even mention the timelines aspect. But aside from that, memory is stored in so many different parts of the body as well. And I found out a while ago that, all of our different senses, we have memories of that in different parts of our body. So I remember an example of, say, a cello player playing a concert, and there's different memories of the sound, of what they can see in the audience, of each hand and what it's doing, of the feeling of the cello against their body, of the room temperature. Like, there's all of these different bits of memory that are housed everywhere, and we still don't even know if it's actually in the body or somewhere external as well. And then so every time we have what we would consider a memory recall, we're actually extracting all of those different bits of information into a conglomerate that we would call a memory. And so that can change from time to time. When Mum and I were on the road, we would be having conversations and we would end up getting into arguments, because I would say, well, you just said this like literally 10 seconds ago. And she would say, no, I said that. And it happened so often, and it was so clear for both of us that no, we actually had a completely different conversation to each other. And every time it would happen, we'd just go, oh, we just did a timeline split. It was that strong.
Yeah, just got to look at the Mandela effect.
Yeah. So, then it's like, okay, so we have all of those things that feel like they're internal and feel like what we would call reality. And so then how do we balance that with what might actually be, coming from an external interference, like from some kind of parasitic entity, for example? How do you navigate between those things to know what is coming from where?
Firstly, I just want to say touch on something with regards to timelines. Of course, when you shift your current frequency, you obviously can shift your past and your future. The past and future aren't fixed. Your past timelines and your future timelines. With regards to discernment, and there is some training. Again, Dr. Jerry Marzinski, uses the MACE energy method. I've just started to read the book with regards to, again, closing doors of trauma, but also training your mind to start discerning between which are your thoughts and which thoughts are coming from the peanut gallery and from a myriad of external sources. I mean, I would really just go just down to the simplicity of meditation, to start to train yourself to be able to just even observe your thoughts, and also getting a feeling about which thoughts are actually in resonance with you as a core being, and which thoughts are random. Because a lot of these thoughts that aren't ours are sort of random and out of the field of what we'd normally think. We get these thoughts all the time. We either pick them up from other people, and also, it's good to do a clearing quite often. Clearing other people's energy out of your space, clearing cords, clearing your space to get that quieter energy is the vehicle which is meant to be help us with discernment as well, if we can learn to tune into that a lot more.
If we look at a lot of these tools for healing, like we've mentioned things like, the New Age path, as we know, have been, really created in order to keep people disempowered under the guise of peace, love and mung beans. So what are some of the tools that you might have come across that are supposed to be for healing and growth, but actually have really been either infiltrated or just purely created out of those satanic kind of forces? You know, how do you easily discern between the tools in service to all and the tools in service to the few?
I think that tools that implant codes into your etheric being are very likely from the false light. All you really need to do is clear yourself, clear your karmic imprints, trapped, so that you can have more access to your own source codes, your own soul, which is vast and can override any of these matrix programs, any of these matrix beings underneath. You don't need codes from who knows where implanted into your being to enhance your healing abilities, so to speak. I mean, of course, an example of that might be Reiki. I mean, I had level 3 Reiki, and I removed those codes and other things like the template and stuff like that. I removed those codes as well. I didn't feel that I needed to enhance my abilities in that way. That's just my personal opinion. And again, it does come down to simplicity. What can give you more access to yourself? The greatest healer is your own soul. Even with doing the Compassion Key practitioner's course and other things, finding out what's going on from yourself, even using, so for example, kinesiology or your own subconscious, finding out what's going on from yourself. The more access you can have to yourself and the vastness of your own being, the stronger your field will be and the stronger healer you will be.
I agree, and I've had quite a few conversations in the last week about, you know, spiritual capitalism, and, you know, to me, any scenario where you're kind of putting your well-beings into the hands of someone up there in a position of authority to you, I feel like that's probably going to be detrimental, as is anything that kind of puts you on a pedestal over anybody else. You know, just like really playing to that ego, but in the negative form of the ego, not the positive aspect of it. And I really agree with you about the simplicity, and I feel that, you know, most of the work I feel that we really need to do is just tending to all of those proverbial layers of the onion, and just, you know, shifting everything to get to know ourselves and who we really are. And, you know, it's such a catchphrase, isn't it? You know your true self, know who you truly are. But really that's the way that we uncover the teacher and the creator within ourselves without having to find something else to inform us.
Yeah, because a real healer is just a facilitator. They're not supposed to tell the person how it is. Yeah. The healer is really that person's own soul. And that person's own, not any external, even angelics or any other beings. It's only that person's soul for that can do all the healing for that person. So
we're, as facilitators, we're really there to just aid the person with torches to say, hey, here's this thing, you know, perhaps you could tend to this bit. And that's for me why I ended up, you know, you and I think we actually met doing a theta healing course, or we might have met before that, but certainly around that time we kind of got to know each other. And I ended up moving over to things like counselling and psyche and stuff like that, because it was more about guiding somebody to find their own path. I think any of those scenarios where you have somebody that is now reliant on you, that's giving you more of that kind of guru complex, and I think any of those attachments from both sides are just really not helpful. So I think, yeah, coming back to simplicity is absolutely key. Removing all the bells and whistles, we don't need all of that. we've been having running jokes about I'm so spiritual. And I'm
Exactly.
so enlightened, darling. You too can be enlightened by me. Walk this way.
Exactly. Exactly. Because a true healer is is empowering that person to empower themselves, not to be over them, as you said before.
So then how do you see that our own self-healing can then affect the way that potentially parasitic kind of energies and entities would relate to us? Because to me, I think they'd probably just get bored and go and try and find another food source.
Yes, because as I mentioned, it closes their access to our field, basically. And all the healing, as I mentioned before, is in the shadow work, which is often shunned in a lot of the New Age spiritual practices. It's all love and light. Yeah, just to clear out all the imprints blocking our way, would stop us from accessing our own soul, our own higher self.
And would you have any practical tips on how to actually reorientate our energy towards that? For example, for me, I find like simply being present with discomfort when it comes up. Again, like it can just be so simple of just simply sitting with something and giving it the attention. I really enjoy the focusing work, the Eugene Gendlin focusing work of just simply sitting with and really exploring the energy and the sensation of the energy in the body until it, without trying to do anything, gradually starts to find its own ease. We almost don't need to do anything except just apply some loving attention. So what are some practical tips that you might give people who would like to just start to clear that space?
Well, as I mentioned before, there's been a few new healing modalities that have come out recently that I think are really quite effective, and one can learn to do some of these healing modalities yourself just by getting the book. For example, Emotion Code using Kinesiology by Dr. Bradley Nelson. You can just get the book, Learn to Heal, Find and Remove Trapped Emotions, because you can sit in counseling for years and not remove these trapped emotions. Just other tools. As I said, they're somewhat simple. I mean, I do Compassion Key, which is a modality where you give compassion to wounded aspects of yourself. Your soul gives wounded aspects for yourself, which helps to dissolve karmic imprints. Of course, the MACE energy method that I'm just starting to look into is also quite amazing. And then, of course, just meditation and being present. And it's much quicker if you have some tools in your kit to use. It does make healing quicker and more efficient. If you stand a little bit on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, and use these tools that are now available. And of course, there's also physical tools that have now become available. TerraCare wand, for example, with those rife frequencies. There's lots of physical tools that we didn't have before, also to help with the frequencies and the blockages and all that kind of thing. And as I said, keeping it simple. It doesn't have to be that complicated.
And actually, I'm just going to touch on one thing briefly, and that is meditation, because there's, so many different forms of meditation that have a lot of different energies behind them. And some of them I feel are questionable. And I feel like really bringing it back to simplicity, there's a lot of meditations that really take you away. And I feel like anything that's taking you away from your body, it's kind of like another distraction. And if you're getting into some of those deep experiences, that they can be quite addictive, especially if you're moving into a kind of disconnected mode of bliss or something like this, and then you want to keep getting back to that. If anything's taking you away from your core and your center, I would be erring with on that with caution, including the CDs I gave you recently. As soon as it comes to the point of like coming out of your body, I'm like, no, actually, I'm not cool with that bit.
Yeah, Edward Mannix, who is behind the Compassion Key modality, wrote in his book about exactly that. If too much meditation and that kind of thing, he talks about the balance between the two. Too much meditation, escapism is not good either. You came to this earth. You are in form, you are incarnated now for some or whatever reason, and you've got to have that balance between the two. So meditation is good, but not as a one and only method and cure for everything. You've also got to be here now.
And just on that, I just really appreciate very simple forms of meditation, like the 1 minute breath in yoga where you're simply focusing on the breath. I mean, you're completely in your body, or yoga nidra where you're bringing presence to all parts of the body, those kinds of things that quieten down your mind, but they don't send you away. And they are super, super simple. As soon as you've got the hang of it, you don't need anybody to guide you. You can just do it yourself. So can you imagine a whole world where everybody's free of attachments and incursions and possessions? Like how do you see that affecting our day-to-day life?
I do think that we have possibly a little bit of a fight in a sense ahead of us. No one's coming to save us. I think that we need to stand on our own 2 feet, say no. It's not just all peace, love, and kumbaya, Abraham Hicks, just attracting on the surface level and thinking everything's going to be right. I've also studied her for many years and figured out a bunch of things that weren't quite right as well. And so there's that balance between actually the fire, standing up as a warrior, saying no to what is wrong on the planet and with the entities in the matrix and everything going on, balanced by the yin and the yang. Need to be balanced for change to take place. Then we can start to get our world on a better timeline, better frequency. As I do say, it is a frequency war. But in order to get a higher frequency, it's not kumbaya. It's also clearing the dirt away, clearing the mud away.
And tending to the shadows. It's tending to the global shadows as well, not just our own. And I see us just being able to, to co-create with each other in a much more transparent kind of way, where we don't have all of these alternate motives and we don't have all of these what I consider to be artificial notions of lack and scarcity and, all of that kind of stuff. Once we can see the beast for what it is and see that the beast needs us more than we need it, we can just stop feeding that, but knowing exactly what it is, seeing how it's still infiltrating, and then choose the opposite.
And there is also some kind of interesting frequency we can download when we get to a certain level from outside of the matrix. And this might sound a bit strange, but I have reasons to believe dolphins might have something to do with it. So if one can listen to the sound of dolphins to help override this matrix. As I said, you get out by going in. And there's some sort of key that we can access if we can clear enough gunk away. So the more people that can become actual programmers of this matrix, as I said, rather than just playing the game or being in the video game, will be the more self-aware people that can start to become programmers, the more chance we have for that peaceful, amazing world.
Actually, that just sparked a vision that came through that I feel like I'd like to share, if that's okay. I was actually doing some of the quantum leaping kind of work, the Bert Goldman stuff that I find really interesting. And I love him because he talks about this. He talks about, quantum leaping and quantum jumping, which sounds like kind of woo-woo, but at the same time, he says, this might just be your imagination. This might just be my imagination. It doesn't matter if it works, use it. Like, I love how earthy he is or was in all of this. Anyway, I was doing that process and I ended up, after a long journey, seeing these creatures that were described to me as what they called seers in this huge, big, organic kind of looking like tour, I guess. And there was a floor of just rows and rows and rows of these creatures that kind of looked a little bit like Chewbacca meets the lion in Wizard of Oz, and bigger than human size and kind of covered in hair, and all sitting in these chairs in like a grid. And they all had their eyes closed and they had like something connected to their minds. I was told that they were what they called seers and that there was 144,000 of them. So it was a really vast space, right? And I was told that each of those basically has basically projects out a whole lot of lives, and so we are one of those lives. And all of the different projections out are then all the different timelines. So we all come back to like one seer, right? But they were all really quiet and it was really dark. And I looked into the depths and I saw the beast that was basically feeding off them, and they had to stay quiet so that the beast wouldn't see them. And it was a very giant, multi-tentacled, huge, black, disgusting octopus, right? Which keeps coming up in all of these different conversations. But it was not opaque. It was down to about 20% opacity. So I was told that all of these seers, they had to stay energetically flatlined until the beast was completely dead, because as soon as any of them would get this sense of like hope or excitement or any of these kinds of things, then this beast would come and squash them. So I was told this is part of the reason why we're in this scenario where so many of us, and a minority, a small minority, but still a lot of us, are kind of envisaging these things, but we haven't been able to kind of get anything to fruition yet. It's because those seers can't actually activate on this stuff yet until the beast is dead. So I found my seer and I kind of merged with him, and this beast came like right through and paused right next to us because it obviously could kind of sense me, and I just kind of stayed neutral and then it disappeared. And I was told that up until recently, the seer, the relationship between the seer and all of its various projections was one way. But now, literally in the last few months, now we can actually affect our seers. And I just thought that was kind of relevant, like talking about the programmers, like the seers are basically the programmers that are creating all of these different aspects of themselves in order to have these experiences. I just keep getting told, 18 months, we've just got another 18 months, and then we'll be ready for the flip. And so up until then, we just need to get clear on what we're creating. So by the time the flip happens and the energy is right and the basic Petri dish is in service to our dreams, then we can actually physically bring all of this stuff into fruition.
That's amazing. And then that makes a lot of sense.
So, Bonny, what are you offering in these realms? So, you're, as well as being an incredible explorer of all of these realms, you're also a fabulous artist. So please get in and check out Bonny's incredible artwork. And I know that you're offering tarot sessions. And what else are you offering, and what's the best way that people can connect with you?
So I'm a emotion code practitioner, certified emotion code practitioner, which is just, again, using the kinesiology to help release trapped emotions in the body. And then, of course, a certified compassion key practitioner, which helps dissolve those karmic imprints, which contributes to the loose schwarm and keeps people in a cycle. Again, karmic imprints can also be created by trauma, not just what you've done wrong, sort of thing. It's not just a payback system. Just go to bridgebetweenworlds.store.
Okay.
And that's my information's on there.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much. And is there anything else that you'd like to share before we go?
Just keep clear, keep positive, and it's so vast, all the stuff happening at this area of time and space. And also very important to connect with people of like mind. Frequency, so important, because the stuff we bounce off each other, and also codes that we activate in each other that we don't even realize. Because a lot of us have different pieces of the puzzle, and then when we get together, the codes can get activated.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your beautiful time and energy and inspirations today. And for all of you at home, please remember to like and subscribe to stay in tune for further discussions on how we can help to create a thriving world for all sentience. So till next time, my friend, be well and keep dreaming a good dream. Ciao for now.